What would you do if the man you've loved and trusted for years turned out to be a complete stranger? Imagine waking up every day, believing you know the person lying beside you, their habits, their secrets, their past. You share laughter, dreams, and a future together, convinced that the love you built was real. But what if, in a single moment, everything you thought you knew came crashing down? What if the man you devoted your life to have a double life, complete with another family, another home, and an entirely different identity? Tonight, we dive into one such case, a story so shocking, so chilling, that it will leave you questioning just how well you truly know the people closest to you. Welcome to Crime Chronicles, where we unravel the darkest, most twisted true crime cases that defy belief. If you're a fan of jaw-dropping betrayals, spine-chilling mysteries, and stories that keep you on the edge of your seat, then you're in the right place. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and brace yourself for a story that will haunt you long after the screen fades to black. But before we begin, ask yourself, could you ever spot a liar living right under your nose? Would you recognize the warning signs of deception, or would you fall victim to the illusion, just like our protagonist did? This case isn't just another tale of infidelity, it's a web of deception so intricate, it took years to unravel. A woman, out for a routine grocery run, stumbles upon a secret so dark, so unthinkable, that it threatens to shatter everything she believed about her marriage. What she thought was just a chance encounter turned into an unraveling nightmare, one that exposed a criminal mastermind, a serial conman, and a trail of broken hearts and stolen fortunes stretching across multiple states. This isn't just about betrayal. It's about manipulation, fraud, and the chilling realization that some people aren't who they claim to be. So, if you think you can handle the truth, if you're ready to dive into a world of deception and lies, stay with us till the very end because trust me, this is one story you won't forget. Let's begin. Jessica Parker never expected a simple trip to the grocery store to shatter her entire world. It was a crisp Saturday afternoon, and the air carried the scent of freshly baked bread from the store's bakery section. The automatic doors whooshed open as she entered, the wheels of her cart squeaking slightly against the polished tile floor. She barely noticed, her mind occupied with the usual thoughts of what to make for dinner, whether she needed more eggs, and if she had remembered to grab everything from her list. She strolled leisurely through the fresh produce aisle, her fingers grazing the vibrant bell peppers as she picked the ripest ones. A soft hum of music played overhead, blending with the chatter of shoppers and the occasional beep of a checkout scanner. Jessica glanced at her list, mentally checking off items. Carrots, check. Potatoes, check. Then, she heard it. A voice. A laugh. A voice she knew too well. Her heart jolted. It wasn't possible. Was it? Her fingers tightened around the shopping cart handle as she turned her head, searching for the source of the voice. And then, just past the towering display of oranges, she saw him. Daniel, her husband. But he wasn't alone. Jessica's breath hitched as she froze in place, her pulse thundering in her ears. There he was, her Daniel, his familiar, easygoing smile plastered across his face. But it wasn't directed at her. Instead, his arm was draped casually around the shoulder of another woman, a stunning brunette in a soft beige coat. The two of them looked entirely at ease, completely unaware of her presence. But it was the child that made Jessica's stomach drop. A little girl, no more than 5, clutched his other hand. She had dark curly hair bouncing as she moved, her tiny fingers wrapped tightly around Daniel's. She looked up at him, giggling, eyes sparkling with unfiltered adoration. And Daniel, her husband, the man who had sworn he loved only her, was gazing down at the child with the same warmth, the same tenderness he had once reserved for Jessica. Her hands trembled, the shopping list crumpling in her grasp. Her stomach twisted. She wanted to move, to demand an explanation, to march up and confront him right there in the middle of the store. But instead, she ducked. Her body acted on instinct, her knees bending as she crouched behind the towering display of oranges. She gripped the cool metal frame of the shelves, peering cautiously through the gaps. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. Who was this woman? Who was this child? Was Daniel cheating on her? Or was this something far, far worse? Jessica's vision blurred with rising tears, but she forced herself to focus. Her trembling fingers fumbled for her phone. She needed proof. Whatever this was, she had to document it. With a deep, shaky breath, she raised the camera, her heartbeat hammering against her ribs as she snapped a quick photo. She couldn't breathe. The walls of the grocery store seemed to close in around her, the sounds of bustling shoppers fading into a distant hum. Daniel was speaking, his voice softer now. Jessica held her breath, straining to listen. "Did you pick out your favorite cereal, sweetheart?" he asked, giving the little girl's hand a squeeze. "Sweetheart?" Jessica nearly dropped her phone. The endearment stabbed through her like a knife. That was their word. He had always called her that. Not another woman. Not another child. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she swallowed them down, forcing herself to stay silent. She needed to think. She needed to get out of there before Daniel saw her. But more than anything, she needed answers. Retreating into the next aisle, Jessica pressed her back against the shelves, her breath coming in uneven gulps. Her pulse roared in her ears. A cold sweat coated her palms as she clutched her phone, staring down at the image she had captured. Her husband. A woman. And a child. A family. Her stomach churned. Had she been living a lie this entire time? She forced herself to think logically. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe this was a distant cousin. Maybe he was just babysitting for a friend. But deep down, she knew better. Daniel had been distant lately. His work trips had become more frequent. He had started locking his phone, something he had never done before, and now this. She clenched her jaw. She couldn't confront him without more evidence. If she accused him now, he would find a way to explain it away, to twist the truth. No, she needed undeniable proof. A plan started forming in her mind. She would hire someone, a professional, someone who could uncover the truth without Daniel suspecting a thing. She would follow him, track his movements, and find out exactly who he really was. Because in that moment, standing alone in the middle of a grocery store, Jessica realized something chilling. She wasn't just dealing with a cheating husband. She was dealing with a stranger. And if she wasn't careful, she might just become his next victim. What would you do if you were in Jessica's shoes? Would you confront Daniel immediately or go back home and act as though nothing happened? Stay with us as we find out her next actions. Jessica left the grocery store that day without finishing her shopping. But she left with something far more valuable, a mission. She would uncover the truth. And when she did, Daniel would never see it coming. Jessica barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw them, Daniel, laughing, his arm around that woman, the little girl clinging to his hand. The image replayed over and over like a broken film reel, each loop stabbing deeper into her chest. Her mind raced with questions. Who was she? How long had this been going on? Was she the only other woman, or were there more? And that little girl, was she really Daniel's daughter? By the time the first rays of morning light streamed through her bedroom window, she had made a decision. She needed answers. She needed proof. She reached for her phone with trembling hands and searched for a private investigator. After an hour of research, reading reviews, and battling the nerves twisting in her stomach, she found one, Ryan Carter. His reputation was legendary, a man known for digging up secrets people wished would stay buried. She dialed the number. The line rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Ryan Carter. Jessica swallowed hard. I need your help. An hour later, She sat across from Ryan in his dimly lit office, her fingers clutched tightly around her phone. The walls were lined with shelves of case files, and the faint scent of coffee and worn leather lingered in the air. Ryan leaned back in his chair, eyes sharp and calculating as he studied her. "Tell me everything." Jessica took a deep breath and pulled up the photo she had taken at the grocery store. She slid her phone across the desk. "That's my husband." Ryan's gaze flicked to the screen. His brow furrowed. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. Jessica's pulse quickened. You've seen him before." Ryan exhaled sharply. "Not him, specifically. But I've seen men like him." He leaned forward, steeping his fingers. "This isn't the first time I've heard something like this." Jessica's stomach nodded. "What do you mean?" Ryan tapped the phone screen. "Men who live double lives. Some do it for power, others for money. And some do it because they're predators." Jessica's mouth went dry. Which one was Daniel? Ryan studied her for a moment, and then nodded. "I'll look into him. Give me a few days." Jessica braced herself for the worst. But nothing could have prepared her for what Ryan would uncover. 3 days later, Jessica's phone rang. She snatched it up, her heart hammering. "Hello." Ryan's voice was grave. "Jessica, we need to talk, now." 20 minutes later, she pulled into the parking lot of a small cafe on the outskirts of town. The moment she stepped inside, she spotted Ryan sitting at a corner booth, a thick folder resting on the table before him. He didn't look up as she approached. His jaw was tight, his fingers drumming against the folder. Jessica slid into the seat across from him. "Tell me." Ryan exhaled and pushed the folder toward her. "Your husband isn't who you think he is." Her fingers trembled as she reached for the folder, her pulse roaring in her ears. She flipped it open. And the world as she knew it shattered. Photographs. Documents. Receipts. Hotel bookings. Jessica's breath hitched as she scanned the images. Different women, different states, different marriages. Her stomach twisted as she saw picture after picture of Daniel, sometimes clean-shaven, sometimes with a beard, wearing different clothes, but always with a woman by his side. And worse, with children. Dozens of them. She slapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a cry. "Oh my God. He has multiple families." Ryan's expression was grim. "Jessica, your husband is a con man." She gripped the edge of the table as nausea roiled through her. "What do you mean?" Ryan tapped on a page, a timeline of Daniel's movements over the past decade. He finds successful women, marries them, drains them of their money, and disappears. He's been doing this for years. He moves from state to state, using fake names, fake identities. By the time his victims figure it out, he's already on to the next. Jessica's blood ran cold. "How many?" Ryan hesitated. "At least 7 confirmed marriages. But there could be more." Jessica felt like the air had been knocked from her lungs. 7. Her hands clenched into fists. How many women had he deceived? How many children had he abandoned? But then, Ryan flipped to the last page. Jessica's breath hitched as she stared down at a bank statement. Her bank statement. Highlighted in bold red were multiple recent withdrawals in large sums, siphoned away into an account she had never seen before. Her heart slammed against her ribs because it's obvious she was next. Daniel wasn't just cheating, he was stealing from her and preparing to disappear just like he had done before. Jessica's hands curled into fists, her nails digging into her palms. No, she refused to be another one of his victims. Ryan's voice was steady. "We can stop him. But you have to be careful." Jessica swallowed hard. "What do I do?" Ryan leaned in. "We gather more evidence. And we make sure he can't slip away this time. Jessica clenched her jaw. She had loved Daniel, and she had trusted him. Now, she would bring him down because he had no idea that the woman he had underestimated was about to become his worst nightmare. Jessica stared at the numbers on the screen, her stomach twisting into knots. Thousands of dollars gone over the past few months, their joint account had been slowly bleeding out, transaction after transactions. At first, the amounts were small, insignificant, even purchases at gas stations, online shopping, and dinner bills. But as she scrolled further, she saw the pattern. The withdrawals had grown larger, more frequent, all siphoned into an account she didn't recognize. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Daniel was planning to leave her. Her mind raced back to the grocery store, to that woman, that child. Had he already started a new life? Was he draining her dry before disappearing forever? Her hands curled into fists. No. Not this time. Jessica inhaled sharply, steadying herself. She had Ryan, she had the truth. Now, she needed a plan. Jessica and Ryan worked methodically, piecing together every scrap of evidence they could find. Phone records, financial transactions, travel receipts, every breadcrumb Daniel had left behind, they followed. Ryan tapped into his network, tracking Daniel's movements, uncovering his aliases. They discovered he had 3 active identities, each with a different woman, each with money slowly vanishing from their accounts. Jessica felt sick. How many more were there? Ryan's jaw tightened. He's very careful, he never stays long enough to raise suspicion. But this time, we're one step ahead. They needed undeniable proof, something the authorities couldn't ignore. And so, Jessica played the role of the unsuspecting wife a little longer. She smiled when Daniel came home and kissed him goodnight. She let him believe she was still blind. All the while, she and Ryan built their case. When they finally had enough evidence, they took it to the authorities. The detectives were stunned by the sheer scale of Daniel's deception. Jessica's heart pounded as she signed the final statement. It was time. Tuesday evening started like any other day of their lives. Daniel walked through the front door, loosening his tie, humming under his breath. Jessica stood in the kitchen, gripping the counter. She forced herself to breathe evenly. In just a few moments, everything would change. The sound of tires screeching outside made Daniel pause. He turned toward the window, his brows knitting together. What the? The front door burst open. Daniel Carter. Hands where we can see them. A wave of officers flooded the house, guns drawn, voices sharp. Chaos erupted. Daniel spun around, his eyes wild. For the first time, Jessica saw real fear flicker across his face. He tried to bolt, but 2 officers tackled him to the ground. He struggled, shouting, but the cold snap of handcuffs silenced him. Jessica stepped forward, heart hammering. This was the man she had loved, the man she had trusted. And now, he was nothing more than a criminal. As the officers yanked him to his feet, the mask finally slipped. Gone was the charming, loving husband. In his place stood a cold, calculating predator. Daniel's lips curled into a sneer. You think you're the first? His voice dripped with malice. There will always be another. Jessica's blood turned to ice. Even now, he felt untouchable. Even in cuffs, he thought he could win. But this time, he was wrong. This time, it was over. Justice served. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. Daniel had stolen millions from his victims, leaving broken lives in his wake. One by one, his other wives came forward. Their stories mirrored Jessica's: the lies, the manipulation, the stolen money. And when the verdict was read guilty on all counts, Jessica finally felt the weight lift from her shoulders. He would never hurt another woman again. As Daniel was led away, their eyes met one final time. For the first time, he was the powerless one. Jessica didn't say a word. She simply turned and walked away free. What would you do? What if this happened to you? What if the person you trusted most turned out to be a complete stranger? Let us know in the comments below. Would you have handled it differently? If you found this story shocking, hit that like button, share this video, and make sure to subscribe to Crime Chronicles for bone-spinning stories. We bring you the most chilling true crime stories, ones that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew.